Welcome, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to Resource Roundtable. My name is Cindy Brooks. I'm the director of EDC Team Jefferson. So Resource Roundtable is an event we host every third Thursday of the month where we invite one or more guests to share their expertise with the Jefferson County community. The Roundtable provides a place where we can come together to learn about resources available to start a business, grow a business, and today we're going to talk about succession, getting ready to sell a business. This is a safe place to ask questions and to share information in the spirit of mutual support. At the EDC, we seek to build over time a network that can kind of seamlessly provide services addressing a range of business questions from startup to succession. We want to ensure that we have a healthy, resilient, and diverse small business, healthy, resilient, diverse, and engaged small businesses serving the people of Jefferson County. So in terms of etiquette, please mute yourself when you're not speaking so the speaker can be heard, and put questions in the chat. If we have a small enough group, we'll just open it up so we can talk to each other directly. I want to say out loud that we're all probably here representing multiple perspectives, and we're here to listen and share and just grow together. It's okay to disagree. Please put your name on your little picture here. You can do that by clicking on those three dots in the corner of your screen. We'd just like to see who's here. And I want to say out loud too that this is going to be recorded and posted on the EDC's YouTube channel for future viewing. I don't have any announcements personally. Does anyone else have an announcement before we get started? Nope. Okay. Well, today I'd like to introduce you to our guest, Ron Nielsen. Ron, I have a tender spot in my heart for Ron because we worked together for about 4 years at the Small Business Development Center. Ron's a very kind human and a certified business advisor. He's here to speak with us about succession planning, how to get ready for business ownership transition. He can also describe just how to tap into services at SBDC. He'll tell us about his unique approach. And with your good questions, we can address topics of interest to this group here today. So welcome, everyone, and thank you, Ron. We look forward to hearing what you have to say about succession planning.
Well, thank you, Cindy. I'm going to do a screen share so we can see what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be talking about business succession strategies. I want to start out by saying a special thank you to you, Cindy, and I have a great appreciation for you and the role that you play there at in Jefferson County and the work of the EDC, having been a former EDC director and ADO. I know the work that you, and the long hours you put in, so I'm just very appreciative of you for what you do. So as we talk about business succession strategies, there are several key things that we're going to discuss over the next 15 minutes or so. I'm going to start by talking about a little bit about the WSBDC. The WSBDC Washington State Small Business Development Center provides no-cost confidential business advising to business owners or managers. We are not attorneys, CPAs, business advisors, or brokers, and do not provide the kind of advice you should seek from a licensed professional. We advise you to work with your CPA to understand the tax implications of the sale of your business, to work with an attorney on the sale of your business, work with an estate planner to maximize the cash you receive from the sale, and to work with a licensed business appraiser to determine the value of your business. You may also choose to work with a licensed broker along the way. Why should we do this? Early planning will help you to have a better experience and to help you better understand what to expect. It will help you to choose when and how to sell your business and who to sell to. It'll help you establish the value of your business, give you time to build profits to increase the value of your business, and give you time to prepare for an internal sale to a family member, a key employee, or employees for a cooperative purchase. All of these can take some time. How to do this and where to start? Well, the key to this is early planning. Planning should begin, if possible, 3 years prior to the sale. Things to consider: changing your management of your tax strategy of year-end profits. What I mean here specifically is most of the time we try to manage our year-end profits as such as to lower them to pay less in taxes. However, if you're planning on selling your business, you actually want to increase the profits you're showing, pay more in taxes, because it's going to come back to help you ultimately in the sale of your business. And I'm going to demonstrate that here in just a little bit. Will this be an internal or an external sale? Who will buy the business? One of my family members, a key employee, or someone else? There are 7 primary methods to selling your business. One is to one of your family members. The second way is to a key employee. A third way, and this is growing in popularity, is to sell to the employees through a cooperative purchase. You might also choose to sell to an internal market competitor or somebody that you know fairly well and maybe competed with over the years, but might like to have your book of business and purchase your business. There is also external sale businesses to businesses that are outside of your market, same industry, that may wish to, again, gain a footprint within your market area. You may choose to sell the business yourself, for example, to bizbuysell.com, or to that customer that's come in at some point in time and said, hey, if you ever decide to sell this business, let me know. You may also choose to work with a qualified business broker. There are 2 common challenges that business owners find when they try to conduct internal sales, whether it's to a family member or key employee or to the employees. One is that the buyer is a little short on cash. The seller may need to assist the buyer, and here's some strategies. One common method that I've used over the years working with business owners and their buyers is to allow the buyer to, especially if this is again a family member or an employee, to set cash aside for the purchase and or allow the buyer to purchase over time a percentage of the business. Banks often require a buyer to have 20% or more to invest in the business purchase or have 20% or more of business ownership. Lenders refer to this as skin in the game. Another common challenge is that the buyer may lack some of the direct industry experience or management skills. To mitigate this, the seller may need to develop a process to train the buyer ahead of time. This can take a few months or even a few years to do. The seller may also agree to stay on for a few months after the sale to help with the transition and provide training. And in some cases, the seller may be retained for an extended period as a consultant. Another option for the buyer is to hire or have in place a manager or other key employees or external professionals that have the experience. Even so, the buyer should plan to learn the needed skills to manage the company. So what is my business worth? This is a common question that comes up all the time. And I know, Cindy, you and I have worked on this back in your SBDC days. So our recommendation here is to get an appraisal from a qualified appraiser or a CPA that is qualified to give appraisals. Note that if you're working with a lender, that they will use their own internally approved appraisers. So the appraiser you may choose, the value that you might get from them or the recommended values may differ from what the bank comes up with. So just be aware of that. The cost of appraisals varies from about $1,500 to $5,000. And if you're planning on selling land and building as part of the business sale, you should expect to pay the upper end of that scale. Businesses that are profitable are worth more. Businesses that are fully functional without the owner needing to be there may be worth more as well. Note there are several different methods to calculate business valuation. And I'm going to show you an example of that here in a moment. Business evaluations can give you an idea of what your business is worth. They establish a range of values. Remember, the value of anything is what a willing buyer and a willing seller agree to. If a bank or lender is required in the purchase of the business, and if they are interested in the deal, they typically will finance 70 to 80% of the purchase price or the appraised value, whichever is less. The lender will also require the buyer to prepare and submit a business plan. And now I'm going to give you an example of a discretionary cash flow method. This is a spreadsheet that I know Cindy has seen before, I've used for years. I'm not a certified appraiser, but I'm using a process that has been used by certified appraisers, and in fact was taught to me by a certified appraiser during some of our national training. So the format here basically is pretty simple. We're using the stated tax return, profit and loss of a company, and then we have some add backs. So you're probably pretty familiar with the anatomy of a profit and loss statement here. This is a fictitious set of numbers that I just plugged in based on 2019, 20, and 21 tax returns. And then this was based on a hypothetical set of numbers based on 9 months worth of income and expenses. So what I want to show you here is I'm going to plug in this line here as we go through the exercise, but it will ultimately give us a range of value for this particular business. So I'm going to assume here in my example that in 2019, that the operational expenses here were about $80,000. And then I'm going to keep it fairly consistent. And we'll talk about this here in a moment as well. We all know what happened in 2020. And then I'm going to assume that it went up here. So 2020, we all want to acknowledge, was a year of COVID. Sales declined here in this particular example. Cost of goods sold, I'm stating generally as a percentage of sales. You can see cost of goods sold creeped up here a little bit. Operating expenses, because this business owner didn't react fast enough to the drop in sales because of the mandatory shutdown order or stay-at-home order, wasn't able to reduce the operating expenses fast enough. So the profit margin went from 45,000 down to 10. 2021, things began to pick back up. Sales increased. 2022 is looking pretty good. So you can see the net income here, or the bottom line, went from 45 to 10, 15, 42 year to date, or at the end of September. And then we're estimating 56,000, which now is better than pre-COVID era or before 2019. Now, you're all probably very familiar with this. In this particular version, we add back some discretionary cash flow items, always adding back in those depreciation and amortization, which are items that the IRS allows us to deduct on our tax return, yet the cash may not have physically left the business in that particular year. And you can see from my list here, we have add backs of depreciation, owner salary, officer medical, interest is being added back. And the reason why that's being added back is a new buyer would have its own debt schedule and its own interest schedule. So we're going to add this back in to see what is the discretionary cash flow that's really left. So in each of these years, we have cash that we're going to add back to these totals up here. And so we go from here plus this to give us our value down here in each year. Now, the only value I'm using in current year is the annualized value of the 9 months worth of data that we have, which in this case is showing a net profit of around $59,000. Line 35 is important, and this does vary by industry. And here's where working with a licensed professional is really important. Your appraisers will have the industry data that gives us accurate weighting. And in mine, I'm using an average that was recommended to me by an appraiser over in Western Washington who claims that generically, this is a fairly safe set of values. Of course, they use exact numbers for each year when they weight them. So this is the first round of 2 rounds of weighting. what we're taking is 10% of 2019, 15% of 2020 and 2021. Current year always gets the heaviest weighting because it's the best reflection of what's really going on in the business. The average of all these are 10% of this, 15% of these two, and 60% of this is $44,730. The key here is that these four numbers have to add up to 100%. The second round of weighting is, again, very specific to each industry based upon their 6-digit NAICS code. And this range here of 2 to 3 times the value, again, will vary. In my example, I chose 2, 2.5, and 3, but I've seen them go as low as 0.2 or 0.1, and as high on the end up here is 10 times the value. And there, again, those are industry specific. So in my example, we took the average weighted value of these numbers, and we came up with 2 times the value is 89,000, 111,000, or 134. Could it be less? Yes. Could it be higher? Yes. But this gives you an idea of how using the discretionary method of cash flow will determine a range of value for a business. And this is also commonly referred to as the going concern calculation, meaning the business is profitable. If the number is 0 here, if there's no profitability or negative numbers, well, then there may not be any value at all for the going concern portion of the business. I'll take your questions on this at the end. So I'm going to minimize this for a moment. We'll go back to here. So, working with a lender, the bank is going to require a business plan. And so the buyer should expect that. So if you're selling your business, this is something you're going to recommend to the buyer that they really need to have prepared. The business plan should cover at a minimum these things. Should have a table of contents, well, a cover page, a table of contents, an executive summary who states who you are, where you are, and really what do you want from the lender and how will the funds help your effort. A business description, a management and operations section, marketing, a sources and uses document of the funds, 2 years month by month cash flow projections, a written narrative of the cash flow assumptions, a year-end profit and loss statement for 2 years, a balance sheet with a startup column and year-end for years 1 and 2, and an appendices with support documentation. Now, this may seem like a lot to develop, and it is. The buyer should plan to spend around 40 hours typically for developing this business plan. Do not submit a plan with lots of narrative. Bankers do not have time to read these. It should include the necessary information for the lender to understand the deal and to determine if the business has the cash flow ability to absorb the debt and to repay it. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to talk about, and I could literally spend 3 or 4 hours doing a presentation on business plan succession and go right into the weeds on all this stuff. So, in the conclusion, these are some important things. So, plan to develop and implement your succession plan, if possible, 3 years prior to when you want to sell. Work with a team of professionals during this process to maximize your experience. And work with your local SBDC advisor who can help you along this in this journey. At this time, I'll take your questions, and I'm looking forward to them to see what you guys have.
Well,
Go ahead, Cindy.
I'll get us started, Ron. I just wanted to ask you, in what context did you see a 0.2% multiplier? That just seems really sad.
Yeah, it really varies. The ones that I saw, the smaller multiplier, Cindy, were typically the 1-person or 2-person operations, where the business owner themselves was the key function in the business. And if you took that person out of it, the business may stop. Mm-hmm. Businesses that have a business model that's built around processes, procedures that allow the business to fully function without the business owner being there typically have a higher value. The one time I saw 10 times the value was actually in a technology company that had that kind of rate of growth and had a positive rate of growth, and the technology was highly sought after, and the industry standard was actually 10 times the value. So, yeah.
Rick, do you want to go?
Yeah. So on the weighting,
Yeah.
you said it was industry specific. Is there any way to get that data other than be an appraiser?
Well,
I mean,
there are some ways to get some of this, Rick, but not all of it.
okay.
The appraisers get information every year that they pay for. And in some of the modeling that I do to give business owners an idea of what this looks like, I might actually contact, I had a good working relationship with an appraiser in the South Puget Sound area who shared the information with me.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the usage of the spreadsheet for me is to give the business owner an idea of what this looks like, not to give them an actual appraisal.
Got it. Yeah.
So I just want them to be familiar with why is it important to, 3 years before, raise your profitability and have to pay those taxes? Well, because there's a benefit to it in the end, typically.
And just to follow up on that, how accurate do those numbers have to be? I mean, if they're off by 10% or something like that, does it make that much of a difference?
Well, Jay, when I've compared my appraisals to the actual appraisals that the business owners I've worked with have paid for, my numbers run typically between 3 to 12%. Within, I've been off as far as 20% before, but I've been as close as 3%. But I try to get the exact tax return information that gets plugged into here. The real key to this is understanding the weighting here on this particular line and down here. Now, in two of the other models that I typically have used as well over the years, and again, I got these models from appraisers that have taught us at our training sessions, our national training sessions once a year. So I have DCF, which I don't remember what the acronym stands for, in Moodridge. So by filling this out, it actually populates these other two models. And this one's based on an internal rate of return. Moodridge has completely different calculations and metrics that were used. And ultimately, all of this information feeds into this area here. And it gives us a range of values. And again, remember, the value of anything is what a willing buyer and a willing seller agree to. Moodridge typically is the most conservative in its application of the calculation method. And we could see the going concern. This was the high end on the going concern calculation. And so what I typically give the business owner is just an average of what these tend to show. But I always encourage them to go out and get an appraisal done. It's money well spent, and it gives you a real idea of what the value of the business is worth. Most business owners I work with have a gut sense, as well as I did when I had my businesses and sold them. And I and most business owners tend to evaluate our businesses higher than it probably really is, because we know the blood, sweat, and hours we put into that to build that business, and we feel it's worth this much. But the numbers might tell a slightly different story. Pete, you've had your hand up for a long time. My apologies.
That's okay, Ron. Glad to listen in and hear this. So anyway, in the add backs, that would include all donations and or other philanthropy things that the business had done?
It can. Yeah, so that's considered to be the discretionary cash flow items. So it could be other owner expenses, other things the owner is allowed to have. In some cases, I had owners that had good cash flow and actually went out and bought a boat and put the business name on the boat. That they, yeah. I mean, things like that. Certainly, donations and other things would go on this line right here. That typically another owner or buyer would have the ability to control that. So we would add those back in to see what the real cash flow is.
Yeah. The other question I had would be the relationship between, I think, the business itself and then the real estate holdings. And is it better to sell the business by itself, retaining the real estate until the new buyer is fully engaged and or able to accept that additional, I guess, debt on their, I guess, on their end?
Yes, that's a good point, Pete. Now, this method we just saw here does not include land or building or real estate holdings as part of this, or other assets. What this is measuring is the value of the assets are contributing towards profitability or cash flow of the company. So land and building, if that's part of the sale, could be an additional add-on to here. In fact, the Moodridge consideration or valuation model does bring that into play, where these other two did not. So if land and building's part of it, it's an additional add-on to these two.
And that brings up a question for us. And one of the things we've been trying to figure out is we've developed quite a large selection of tooling, which the tooling is really the value of the company because it makes its diversity. And is that included in, I guess that would be a whole nother line if you have a big asset of those tooling that makes the company have the different variable product lines?
Sure. Again, that would be added in right here on Moodridge, but it's not considered in the other two here directly. But the answer is those fixed assets, yes, there arguably could be a greater dollar value given for those. And I've seen it successfully negotiated between a seller and a buyer where they took the book value, which of course is whatever you paid for it less depreciation, and whatever's left is the book value as one number. And then they went out and got fair market value with what does it cost to replace this equipment used in today's market, and come up with a dollar value for that, and then negotiate what you think is a fair price for that, in addition to the going concern calculation that we saw from here. To be honest, there's a wide range of what I've seen negotiated between sellers and buyers, but I think that's a good point to take a look at, Pete, and especially the foundry. Absolutely.
Yeah, then the other issue for us is just raw materials on hand, because we're in the copper and bronze alloy, product line. That's a high value commodity that we have to bring in. So they're just other thoughts I want to try to get across, that we have a complex system to try to put that together. And I can really understand how your 3-year concept comes into play, because it's a lot to try to put together a package, even if you're trying to sell it to your employees or the other, so that they fully understand what they're buying.
Sure. I spoke to an appraiser recently that we were talking about the effects of COVID. And when we use numbers like this from past performance, how do we factor in COVID into 2019 and 2021? And his first response to me, and this is a long-time appraiser, is that, well, you almost want to throw COVID years out, because it's not an accurate reflection of what the business or the performance of the business. But in the end, he said that what they might do is look at how to properly account for COVID's effects on the business performance as part of a negotiating strategy. And I don't have any more than to say that at this moment. I would expect to probably learn more as we go along through this year and into next year about how people that are selling their businesses have actually factored COVID in.
Yeah, I know one thing that affects us tremendously. We've had more demand, but unfortunately the labor force is not there to supply the, and that's a tough one when you go from 10 or 15 employees to 5. So it definitely cuts into the cash flow, but the demand is way higher than it's been.
Yeah, that's an issue across most industries, businesses right now. I want to go back to your inventory question though. Inventory is extremely important, and hopefully you have good inventory management processes in place to have an accurate inventory of what's there. That has been one of the biggest bugaboos, if you will, in working with businesses that are selling, is if they don't have accurate inventory management practices and process, we don't have any idea really what's there unless we do a physical inventory on, on or before the day of the sale of the business. So if I'm working with you as the buyer of the business, I'm going to ask you to make sure that the seller has, some kind of accurate system that you can really trust and rely upon, because that's part of the business value. And also, after you buy it, how is that going to be put in your balance sheet by your accountant? Can have significant impacts on your taxes for year 1, 2, 3, and 4 and beyond. So how that's placed on the balance sheet is also equally important.
Yeah, I can see that is a challenge, and especially for small businesses growing that have thousands of moving parts. It's a tough one to get to. So that is one of our top questions: is how do we get a good process to do that?
You bet. You bet. And then Wendy and Rick, I'm not sure who raised their hand first, but I'll let one of you go ahead and speak.
I think Rick was ready to ask a question. He just hadn't raised his hand yet. So you want to go first, Rick?
Sure. Well, you're going to regret this because I got a whole bunch of stuff. So do you want to go? Why don't you go?
Wendy?
Okay, I'll go quickly. I'm interested in the trends for the sales of businesses, how many businesses, what you've been seeing as far as businesses being placed on the market, what's the most effective for the seller. And I'm just wondering, are people extracting the value out of their businesses? What's the trend?
Well, that's a good question, Wendy. I wish I could say that for all business owners, when it's time to sell, we're going to make a nice, tidy profit and be happy as we go off into the sunset. From about 2012 on, I've seen a steady increase in people who are selling their business, largely because they were at retirement age. What I'm noticing now is that there's a lot of younger individuals who are happy to start a business, build it up so far, and then sell it and do something else. So that's an interesting trend that I'm seeing. What's going on now with the, I wish I could say post-COVID, but latter stages of COVID, let's hope, at least its influence on the business community. We're at the, when you look at what they called the silver tsunami years ago, about the baby boomers getting to a certain age and we'll start to see a lot of retirement, that is playing out. And that's still the biggest single driver that I'm seeing as far as people selling their businesses. And there's a substantial amount of America's net worth in those business owners that have that. And I think we're going to see that continue. So thus far, even through COVID, I didn't see particularly a slowdown in people who were interested in selling because they were at retirement age. What I did notice is that some of those I had talked to at the end of 2019 decided to wait to sell their business because of what COVID did to them, and sales dropping off dramatically. And they felt like they, one, needed to see it through to get maximum benefit for the sale of their business, and two, because they were scared to death to turn loose of the company at that particular point in time, even though for some of them, they had to dig into their bank account to put cash back into the business to keep it alive. Now, did that answer your question?
Well, I think they're the second point was the value that they're extracting from businesses. I just am wondering, since the market might be flooded with businesses for sale, whether they're not getting value, their expected value back in the sale.
I think it really varies. Some of the transactions I've seen, particularly over the summer, would tend to lead me to believe that those that held tight through 20 and 21 and are sold down are generally realizing what they hope to get out of the sale of their business. So yeah, now those that have strong cash flow and those that have business models where the business owner isn't critical, if you take them out, the business is going to stop. Those that had good processes, procedures, and good training programs and keep people in place really seem to hold their business value.
Thank
Rick.
you. Ron.
Oh, you're welcome, Wendy. Rick, I'm gonna get my pen, so when you start talking, I'll write down whatever you're saying here.
Cool. So, well, first, I actually have a small success story. One of my clients is a small acupuncture practice in Port Angeles, and they just sold their practice and their building. So that's fantastic news. They'd been trying to sell it for a little over a year, but again, COVID, right? So, but they did just find a willing buyer. So that's exciting. I wish I'd had this when I was initially consulting with them, because that would have been hugely helpful. So thought back to the how to deal with 2020. One thing that crossed my mind was perhaps you just reduce the weighting on that year to maybe half the 15% that you had put on it, and then it would have less of an effect on the overall valuation. And then I have a question regarding the DCF versus the going concern, because they both deal with cash flow. What's the difference?
Hey, Rick, I'm going to bring that back up on screen so you can see it. Okay, the going concern is strictly the profits to loss of the company, with add backs into it with 2 levels of weighting. Okay. DCF doesn't use 2019, so it does use 2020, 2021, and annualized 2022, and it takes it right off of the going concern, by the way. And then it makes some other assumptions and has different calculations for the weighting, which is listed down here. So 2022 is going to get 3 times the weighting, 2 times the weighting in 2021, and basically whatever the numbers are in 2020 is what's going to be used in the assessed weighted value. Then another big difference is future net present value forecasting, or and in this case, discounting. More years out we get in the future of the evaluation, we're going to reduce our overall number with the assumption that further out in the future would be harder to predict. So we're going to take a less firm number here than we had in the beginning. So this is a completely different process. Yes, this has weighting and it has cash flow add backs up here as this one does. But when we factor this in, that changes everything. The note here, plus inventory. So that kind of goes back to our earlier conversation about what inventory value we have. In this particular example, I just left it at 0.
Right. Okay.
So that could include a service company that may not have much inventory or any.
Right. And then my final question is, would you use this same process? I'm assuming so, but I'm just wondering if you might use a different process if you are hoping to do an ESOP or some kind of transfer to employees.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, I would use the process. Working with cooperatives or ESOPs. ESOPs to me are some of the most demanding in how they work. They are way beyond my technical ability to give you a good answer. I've only worked with one ESOP in my SBDC career. And I have my hearing aids in, and when the phone goes off, I hear it in my ears, and I'll never hear you guys. So let me send a message. There we go.
Yeah.
Cooperatives, Cindy knows as much about cooperatives, I believe, as I do. In fact, she and I have had some great conversations about these, but working with some of the experts that do this, I think is a really good idea as a starting point to glean information. And so, Rick, I can touch bases with you offline. There's an entity that I used to work with out of the South Puget Sound area that does cooperatives, helping to facilitate the sale, helping to train and educate the buyers. There's others out there that do this as well. I think that's a pretty good way to do that. There's a number of issues in determining who's going to put in, what cash and what equity positions people are going to have, the management structure of the company, who's going to make decisions. If we're all buying it, or do we all have equal say, or how's all that going to work with varying expertise? So there's a number of other factors in a cooperative purchase, similar to an ESOP in that regard.
Yeah. Well, I hope, I'm biased, but I'm hoping that there is an increase in ESOPs moving forward. I'd love to see more democratically controlled businesses, and I think it can be a real, for instance, if you want to sell your business and you don't have an employee who has either the financial or other capacity to take it on individually, maybe an ESOP can be a really good option. So, yeah. Go, Cindy.
Cindy.
I just want to comment on some of the stuff that Rick's been saying. Rick, I got to work with an ESOP transition just sort of lightly in another county. And we discovered that there wasn't an attorney or an accountant that had that specialty in Washington state. So we had to do like a national search to find qualified people to actually assist in this transition. And the company did it efficiently, like in about a year, 15 months, they had made this major transition. But the company has to be of a certain size and revenue to be an ESOP. So you have to have a significant number of employees and create significant revenue to make that whole process worth it. So around here, I think most companies would tend to fall in the category of a co-op potential if you're looking at worker ownership. And yeah, Angelos Millworks, Hartnagel's is a ESOP. Danny Steiger often shows up at NODC meetings and other places, and he's happy to talk about that. But I just want to say that generally speaking, you need to be big and make a lot of money to make that worthwhile. The way the guy in the other county thought about it when we talked about it after the fact is that there's stuff that you do in the beginning that you can do with your accountant and people that are available locally. And that's just the regular stuff that we should all be doing with businesses anyway, making sure there are clear processes, that you have an employee manual, everything's sort of tidy, that you're working to create some profit with the company, not just using a tax avoidance strategy. You've got all that kind of ready. And then there was this black box in the middle where you'd have to go out and find specialty law and accounting practitioners to help you with that specific ESOP portion. And then there's stuff at the end that you can do to sort of help the employees, learn how to work within this new structure. So I think it's more complex than we can do alone. And it's good to really look at the differences between co-ops and ESOPs and understand how to talk to businesses about that, in terms of size and revenue.
Just a quick question out of ignorance. If it's just a small number of people, let's say 5 to 10, how different would that be from an LLC to do a co-op or an ESOP?
As far as the 5 or 10 employees wanting to buy the company?
Yeah.
I think the co-op model would be the one that we'd probably be talking about here, Jay.
Okay.
As Cindy indicated, because of the structure, the last the only ESOP I've been involved in had over 800 employees and several $1 million in sales.
Right. But we have small businesses here in the county, and I'm just wondering, is it a similar thing or is it a completely different structure?
They're different. What's similar is the employees are trying to buy it.
Yeah.
But it is a bit of a different process. Now,
okay.
Another similarity is that the structure that Cindy alluded to is equally important in both. That having processes in place and a clear understanding of the expectation that if I'm an employee and I'm buying into this company, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Who makes the decisions and so on. But
okay.
But I would say generally the small businesses that we're going to see, whether it's in Jefferson County, I'm over in Chelan County, or so over here, or Douglas County, or Okanagan County, we're probably going to see more of the cooperatives.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And Peter, Mike, I'm not sure who was first between you, so I'll just call on you, Pete, first, and Mike, if you don't mind being.
Okay, my question's kind of about holding companies and or these what we call exit strategy companies. Do you have opinion if a holding company is asking for interest in your business because, you know, again, most of them are for manufacturing and or the paper mills, various different ones. Is that a route you would recommend even exploring?
Pete, I know so little about that. I couldn't even speak to those.
Okay.
To be honest, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Micah?
Yeah, Pete brought up earlier the issue of real estate. What if somebody was selling the business part of a live work situation? So they'd keep the real estate and still like have interest in the property, but they'd just be selling the business out.
Sure.
What would you kind of like subtract out of the profit to cover the increased rent and the loss of tax benefit?
Well, it depends on what I'm selling them. Again, if I'm selling them just the business and not the land and building, then that's going to affect the purchase price up front.
Mhm.
So most likely, if you're profitable, then the going concern calculation or some form of that I showed you would come into play. And would likely determine the value of the business or a range of values for the business. If it's not profitable, then I'm likely to have an asset sale where I'm only purchasing the value of those assets. And typically that means fair market value of those assets.
Okay.
But that happens all the time. I have a deal that closed already with an employee who managed the company for 5 years that just recently bought it from the owners who were ready to retire. And I have another one where an employee has worked with them for 2 years, but was again involved in the management, and this one is buying the company as well. The first one was about just under a $3 million purchase, and the latter one is about $1.3 million. The first one included land and building. That's why it was almost $3 million in the purchase. The second one is just the business, which is very profitable though. So it has a substantial value to it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike. I wish I gave you a better answer, but that is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Jay?
I've got a question. Somebody who I know is looking to sell a business probably in 1.5 to 2 years. How much of an impact, since they didn't start 3 years, will they have?
I mean, a 2-year lead-in time to sell the business?
Yeah.
Depends on how they're selling it. If it's going to be sold to a family member or a key employee or cooperative, there's enough time within the 2 years to generally make those.
Probably an external person.
Okay, external. The first question I would sit down and ask the business owner would be, in your tax returns, how have you been managing your taxes with your CPA? And would there be a substantial increase in profits if you took a different strategy? In other words, instead of buying something and because you had plenty of cash in the bank and maybe Schedule 179ing or depreciating it through the business, maybe we would look at holding off on that and go ahead and pay the extra in taxes for that year. Or what have you been doing compared to what can we do in the next couple of years to look at how can you maximize that profitability.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
There's Jay, there's more we could talk about in that regard, because there's more pieces that we'd have to take a look at that affect the overall outcome of this whole thing.
Right.
So I think that they would be behind the 8 ball potentially in terms of just showing profit, depending on their tax strategy.
Agreed.
Yeah.
When do you,
Yeah, so when we're talking about ESOPs and cooperatives, I just have a question. My understanding of ESOPs, the employee stock option plans, is that it's a motivation and a shared, I guess it would be shared revenues, right? There would be that employees would benefit from the generation of revenues in an ESOP, where a co-op is more of that sort of, and I suppose an ESOP could be organized legally so that there's more democratic process in the internal structure of the organization. And then a co-op is ownership, shared ownership, and that also has to be sort of ironed out. But can you speak more to the difference between an ESOP and a cooperative model?
Wendy, I really can't. It's been too long ago since I was actively involved in an ESOP, and I think I would not choose to even talk about what I learned from a couple decades ago to now in ESOPs. It's my apologies.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I put a couple of resources in the chat for people if they want to look at articles.
Other questions?
Well, I'm curious, Ron, at SBDC, since we, statewide, we're watching businesses sort of liquidate and close their doors. Some of that's due to COVID and some of it's maybe just not preparing for a sale, being kind of caught off guard. How, in your opinion, can service providers get ahead of this a little bit if it's true that 4 out of 5 businesses are closing down rather than completing a sale successfully? What do you think we can do differently to do outreach and to help people think about this sooner?
Well, just what you're doing now, Cindy, getting the word out there to people to help better understand the process and what goes into it and the timing of when you want to start to plan for the sale of your business. Sometimes it happens by, happenstance. Someone walks in the door and says, "I'd like to buy your business." That can happen, but from most of us, it's a planned process. I worked with a company in Lacey that came to me initially with the idea of the employees buying it. But once the employees heard more about the cooperative process, they decided they backed away from that because they couldn't come to agreement amongst themselves about how this thing might move forward. So the business owner at one point felt like maybe this wasn't going to happen. Maybe all I'm going to do is just sell the company for what I have in it for equipment. And then 6 weeks later, she sold the business for exactly what she wanted, which was just a little over $2 million. Things really can go, the ebbs and flows of it are all over the map at times. And emotionally, it's hard on us as business owners. We like to see things more structured. When I'm ready to retire, I'd like to have you, Cindy, you're going to buy it, you're going to give me a check, and I'm going to give you the keys, and we're both going to smile and part ways happy. But it oftentimes it's a lot more work than that. That particular sale that I was referring to, the person, we did an external sale, and it involved a competitor from another market that they knew. They were friendly. They contacted that competitor, and lo and behold, mom and dad weren't interested, but the 20-something-year-old son who did not want to work in mom and dad's business was interested. And so mom and dad helped the son buy the business to help him along his way. And it happened that fast. Within 6 weeks, the deal, from the time the contact was made until the closing of the business was 6 weeks, or the closing date of the sale of the business was 6 weeks.
Well, I'll have to say, like, working on a few succession deals with people, I keep coming back to the fact that it's really, we treat this as a transaction, but it really is about relationship.
Very much so.
And it's difficult. It's hard on everybody if we're not able to communicate, and if things aren't disclosed or whatever. anything that we can do to uplift relationship and healthy communication will help with this succession planning and with the sale.
Indeed. Yeah, getting the word out there, plan early. If it's just you in the business or you and maybe one or two employees, it may end up being an asset sale. But even that is just better than, a planned asset sale would generally garner you more than a fire sale in the 11th hour because you're done.
Yeah, and it really is a benefit to the family too, to be thinking about this ahead of time, because, if one spouse dies and the other one is sort of unprepared, lacking the business knowledge, it's going to be way more difficult.
Absolutely. And to that point, Cindy, I've seen lack of planning even in that area. I worked with I worked with a company that had 3 partners that were owners. And they had in their partnership agreement that if one of them wanted to leave or one died, they had established a business evaluation process, and the other 2 would have the first right of refusal to purchase the company. Well, it happened. One of the business owners did die. However, the wife of the business owner that died in the will was given the business to her. Well, the 2 business owners didn't want her to be part of the business model. They were just going to, here's the process, we're going to give you a check and you're out of it. Well, it ended up in a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
So better planning, holistic planning would have helped that process better. But so there was a disagreement between 2 different legal documents.
Yeah, that's hard. Well, Ron, we're getting close to the top of the hour. Boy, somebody's just in the waiting room. I'm going to let them in as we're saying goodbye. Hi, Michelle. We're just winding up. I'm just getting ready to thank Ron for presenting to us for this last hour. You'll be able to find this recording, though, on our YouTube channel within the next week or so. So, Ron, thanks very much for taking an hour out of your day to help us in Jefferson County understand succession planning. And anybody listening to this, please reach out to Ron if you have questions. You can also call the EDC and we can help you find resources. So thanks for being here and thanks for sharing.
You bet. My pleasure.